Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by David Rodriguez of Homeschool Leader, someone who has been working hard for a long time to teach parents how to get their kids out of these indoctrination camps we call schools. He's also been fighting very hard throughout the pandemic. From the very beginning, he may have been one of the first people I saw out there really going in the streets, offering free hugs, speaking out against the mask mandates. He's done amazing work throughout all of this, and he has been attacked brutally by the government's these organized crime rackets due to this amazing activism. First of all, I really appreciate you joining us again.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Josh, to speak freedom and solutions and touch base with you.
Absolutely. So I want to get right down into it because, you know, in the last year and a half, almost about 2 years, the amount of people homeschooling their children has more than doubled. In some cases, we're looking at stats that look almost like it's tripled. It is blowing up in popularity after all these years, and it was already blowing up in popularity previous to the pandemic. In recent days, I've seen a lot of people pulling their kids out of these indoctrination government schools, as well as private schools, and homeschooling them. It's a issue of contention for a lot of people because a lot of people aren't quite sure how to do it, how to go about it. And I think the number one question I get asked by parents across the board is, what about socializing? How can my children socialize with other children out of school? Because that is like the main aspect of public school that has any benefit whatsoever, is the actual children being able to talk to each other, hang out with each other, etc. I'd like to hear you go into this and respond to that.
Yeah, so that's a very common question, and how we resolve it is to look at the environment of the school system and contrast it with what the home environment looks like. And so in schools, you are sitting with all the similar age, 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds. Okay, so you're age segregated, and you actually have to get permission to speak. And if you need help with your assignments, then you can't talk to your neighbor and collaborate like in a real business scenario. That's called cheating in the government monopoly compulsory school system. And so the current environment is you need permission to go to the bathroom, permission to get a drink of water, permission to speak. And there's one teacher at the front of the room trying to lead, 30 students. God bless these teachers. Okay. I'm not trying to throw the teachers under the bus, but it's the system itself that is antisocial in that you got to get permission to speak, and you're not allowed to share notes or speak with the other people. Now, I do get the point about being around other students because I went to public school and played sports, and that was my saving grace in the school system. I got to play sports and go have fun. Well, in the homeschool environment, the parent, and I should give the definition of homeschooling for the audience here. My definition is that homeschooling is when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. So mom and dad, if you're homeschooling or consider it, the idea is that you create a safe environment. And so when it comes to socialization, one of the best things to do is bring your child with you as you go shopping, as you go to church or temple, or as you go throughout the day, because you do have natural interactions, even if it's simple as going to the gas station. These basic encounters, this is socialization. Now, mom and dad, if you are not fully skilled in socialization, your child's going to inherit that by observing you. So this is the challenge, is that mothers and fathers, they want to outsource the responsibility, give my child away so my child can go learn how to talk and interact with other people while I'm going to stay silent or shy or being a hermit or whatever some introverts are. And part of us are all introverted, part of us are all extroverted, in my opinion. So the understanding is that we are learning all the time. And the philosophy of my school, which is Valor Academy, is that the world is the classroom. And the other principle is anything and anybody you can learn from can be a teacher. So we want to open up this idea from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. being this is the learning time to it's always learning time. In fact, you can't even turn it off. So what I would say is, for socialization, your child is watching you, and you might have to make some effort to, if you're kind of an introverted person, you might have to make some effort to, say, this is how you introduce yourself. Some of these basic manners and norms in society, but the danger is that you leave your child in the school system and they think this is normal. You know, you can't see the facial expressions for 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds. And that's what's so diabolical out here in California and maybe through other states is they're trying to make these vaccines mandatory, and even in making the mask itself like a permanent part of school. And it's like, well, I thought the mandates got reduced, or they got, I guess, pulled back. But the children are in classroom.
Yeah.
There's one of these great, go ahead.
Well, in California and New York, you know, the mayor of New York City recently, Eric Adams, was just confronted a few days ago because he's going to lavish parties maskless, as he has every right to do. But the fact is, he's pushed forward masks for toddlers in preschool and elementary school, and like the absurdity is so unbelievable and so obvious to most people that are paying attention. And that's one of the things that has really pushed a lot of people into homeschooling recently. Talk about lack of socialization. Imagine not being able to see a smile for a large percentage of your entire lifespan. It is evil.
That's right. Yeah, it is. And this is my conclusion, just kind of, you know, thinking about it and doing some reading and research and talk with parents, is that they're actually going after the children because the children are the next generation of adults. And if you indoctrinate them with the slave mentality from a young age, then when they're 15, 18, 20, they're like, yeah, this is like normal life. And, you know, you're familiar with it because you're a successful guy. It's like, this is not normal life. School, like I try to graduate, you know, youngsters as soon as possible. I graduate them as young as 14 years old and 15 and get them out of there, because this system of 12 years of mandatory attendance and mandatory curriculum is the most superficial environment that you could imagine. And it literally is the indoctrination of your child with the statist cult belief system. Again, this is not to say that there's bad teachers, you know, everywhere in the system, but they are putting this idea that authorities and strangers have a higher ownership over your life and your destiny and your dreams than you might. And then after 12 years, and you're like, you're sitting there telling me what to do. And the future, my friends, is about you deciding what you want to do. There's nobody who's going to tell you what to do with your life. And this is the big question of how did we get here? Where are we going? What's my destiny and my dream? These are big, deep questions that take time to unfold and to develop inside of us. And so that's why I tell parents, you want to get your kids out as soon as possible. If you have a child who is super ambitious or super bored, get them out of there. And I think, as you mentioned, we've seen like a 200%, maybe 300% in some data of the increase of homeschoolers. And I find that very exciting and very hopeful for humanity. It's got to be like the silver lining on the whole scamdemic.
Yeah, well, it hit about 200% in September of 2021 from January of 2020, which is, so I'm assuming it's probably coming up on 300 at this point in time, because we've had more than half a year since. And you know, if there's ever an excuse for people to finally kind of break free of that system and look into their child's education in a different way than what they grew up themselves being taught was education, it would be this scamdemic, this plandemic. In the last year and a half, 2 years, you know, a lot of people have woken up, and they've been forced to wake up because they were shaken out of their slumber in a way that we've never seen before in history. You did a lot of amazing work for many, many years. You off and on, you talked with people like John Taylor Gatto, who did unbelievable work in this realm. I want to ask, what do you think he would be saying right now if, like, just looking at the way they have tried to force vaccine mandates in school. In places like Canada, by the way, you can secretly get a vaccine without telling your parents in an after-school program. So basically the government owns your child and will poison them, inject them, and do whatever they want with them. Masked children, this idea of being schooled over Zoom by government teachers. I mean, how do you think someone like John Taylor Gatto would have looked at this kind of situation if you were still alive today?
Yeah, you're right. So I got to work with John Gatto actually and help publish the Underground History of American Education. Very powerful book about the history of the school system. And I think John Gatto would, he was a very lighthearted guy. He knew the seriousness of the situation. And he was just always like, man, this is, a diabolical system, but he kept a light spirit about it. So that's really important for you parents out there as well, because it is so dark. It is so heavy if you try to swallow it all, but it's one day at a time. It's one breath, one brick at a time to figure out the education for your child. I think John would just be almost like shaking his head and really like blown away that parents are standing around watching this happen. And I imagine he would probably say, I'm surprised parents aren't burning down these buildings. You know, like it's so open and obvious for anybody, as you say, for if you have eyes to see, it's like it's so clear. And then one of the great things that he taught me and, taught the world is that the school system has so much money going through it. Some numbers, 600 billion. I've seen 750 billion numbers, and even over $1 trillion of revenue going through this system. Massive freaking business here. So he said, you're not going to change the system. He said, you have to get your kids out of the schools. That's the only way to change the system. Although he did say, if you want to change the system, all you have to do is one thing, which is make attendance voluntary. And he said, in 5 years, you'll see really significant changes. And he said, within 10 years, you would not recognize the school system, because it's the only organization other than prison that mandates attendance. And that's really important, because that's the whole crux of the matter here. The whole foundation is your child's being forced to go there, and you're being forced to take them there. So, and we kind of mentioned earlier about the CPS possibilities. The CPS is a terrorist organization. They are terrorizing you, mothers and fathers out there, because of maybe something that you heard or maybe something that you read. But it's mostly using fear and intimidation to hand the most precious, vulnerable, beautiful being that you will ever have in your possession or stewardship or custodianship, handing it over to the state. And that's really I think probably the most important thing, is that even if you screw up homeschooling, you're not going to do as bad as the public school and teaching this slave mentality, this permission mentality. And so you really can't screw up. But if you think you're going to screw up, then you get this psychological resistance. And that's what I think this conversation maybe to assist you in overcoming that, so you can get your kids out these schools.
Absolutely. Make sure to check the links below. GoGetFunding.com, Patreon, Subscribestar. We have a PayPal address, we have a Bitcoin address, and we have a CoinTree link with multiple different cryptocurrencies that you can donate in if you please. It's great to help keep independent media alive as we travel around the world to report on the real stories as eyewitnesses, rather than see this revisionism from mainstream media. You can also go and check out rncstore.com. That's Richardson Nutritional Center, your source for Laetrile online, made famous by G. Edward Griffin's book, World Without Cancer. Get your apricot seeds, Laetrile, vitamin B17, and amygdalin there. Also go and check out whamsurvival.com for your long-term storable foods, where you can get multiple different kinds of storable foods. You save money if you go through us. And of course, this is in the face of the controlled collapse of the supply chain. It's never been more important to get long-term storable foods, my friends. And of course, make sure to check out our Flote Fest link in the description of this video and use code WHAM for your tickets to Flote Fest 2022 in Gause, Texas, April 29th to May 3rd. I'm looking forward to this. Multiple amazing speakers, including Eddie Bravo and people like Sam Tripoli, and they're talking with Dr. Andrew Kaufman. There's Spike Cohen. There's many more yet to be announced. I can't wait to bring those to you. That'll be in Gause, Texas, and it's just outside of Austin. I know a lot of freedom people who still have their kids in public schools because they're just worried about how to go about it. And, I kind of think of it in the same way as if you have mainstream media for adults, indoctrination for adults, where you have, for example, we saw a recent whistleblower come through with leaked documents in the UK that showed that from the beginning of the pandemic, they used fear-mongering tactics to scare people into compliance. It was a whole branch of the government devoted just to scaring people into compliance, regardless of real science or not. Yeah. And you have the same things in the US. We've had Operation Mockingbird, which is still in effect today. And you have these examples of all this money flooding from the pharmaceutical system and the government, about $10 billion in grants to mainstream media to indoctrinate people about vaccines, all this is public now. Now that's indoctrination for adults. Now imagine if school were a way to just put your child in front of a television and make them watch CNN all day, but worse, because some of the things I'm hearing in school is worse than anything they'd ever openly say in the public on television. The things I'm hearing from people, for example, I know of someone who was 9 years old in school, and she was told all girls are bisexual. So that was kind of a weird thing to say to a 9-year-old. This is in Canada, of course. And then Canada, California, it could have been any of those places, but and on top of that, about 2 years later, she's told there's no such thing as boys or girls. And within a very short amount of time, everyone in the class is shaving their heads. All the girls are shaving their heads, and they're in weird relationships. You got a girl who's got a shaved head who calls herself a boy, who's dating a boy who calls himself gay, but he's not really gay, just so that they can have a normal relationship without being criticized by this strange, wacky culture that's being created around them. And if someone has to maneuver like that, I mean, seriously, why are people putting their kids in these schools? So for the people out there, I guess the biggest concern with all this indoctrination we're seeing is, okay, we want to pull our kids out, but will the government come after me? My kid has a birth certificate. They're in the legal fiction world, unfortunately, because maybe I wasn't educated when I had the kid, or I didn't know what else to do. The biggest concern is CPS, or social services, coming and taking the kids away. How often does this happen, and what can people do to get out of this situation?
Yeah, so they're mostly like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. We're going to come get you, because the schools make their money on the attendance rolls. The only reason that CPS is doing that is because of the financial aspect of it. So that's why they care how many absences or TARs you have, because you're not there to market. So just like the teachers, okay, my mother was a retired public school teacher. I have family members who are teachers and principals now, loving, sweet people, many of them. And there's some CPS workers who are nice people as well. So, so we can't necessarily hate the teachers or the workers, but understand the system they're a part of, even like cops. Okay, I've even met some good cops. All right, I know the system itself is super brutal and terrible, but again, it's the human aspect in there. So my suggestion is you don't inform the CPS about anything that you're doing. Generally, I don't know about Canada, but in the US, homeschooling used to be illegal, like in the 70s and 80s, and the parents pushed back. And now every state is it's lawful or legal to homeschool. And so sometimes you can just remove them without saying anything to the school. Sometimes you got to write a letter. But I always suggest my clients that you are being very nice to the front desk lady, very nice. If CPS comes, which is very unlikely, okay, again, they're using the idea of the Wizard of Oz and like, we're going to come get you. And that's enough to scare people to keep their child in the school system, because it is absolutely atrocious to have your child kidnapped or even spoken to by these CPS people and some of the questions that's going on. So if CPS comes or CPS calls you, you be very respectful and you say, am I required to talk to you? Or you want to video record if they come to your door. Don't let them in your house. You be very respectful. My friends, it's time to recognize your rights as a man or as a woman, parent, and really step into that. You own this body right here. In fact, your child, you could argue, and it's actually scientific, that child is your genetic property. Now, we as people who believe in self-ownership and non-aggression know that they own themselves, but they can't really take care of themselves at age 2 or 5. And so at some age, you know, the young person steps into their self-ownership, and, you know, they step into being a young man or being a young woman. So for CPS, number one, it is mostly terrorizing your mind. But if they do call you, you want to be respectful and not poke the beast or not poke them and, you know, call them out, and all, which is all righteous. You know, yelling at the CPS and saying, get the hell off my porch or whatever is all righteous. But unfortunately, for generations, our parents, our grandparents, God bless them, they didn't understand the value of freedom as a collective. And so now we're kind of at I would say the end game or maybe peak statism, and people are starting to come out of their slumber, and they don't know really what the problem is yet, in my opinion. You and I know it's statism and the belief in authority, but many people think it's the Democrats are the problem, or the Republicans, or whoever, somebody that they never spoke to, or, you know, was not even their actual representative. And so this is a generational type solution for, you know, the next generation and other children. But for your child, I think one of the key things is to distinguish what is an education and what is a schooling. Okay. So when it's a mandatory attendance, mandatory curriculum, that's a schooling. What does that mean? That means when somebody, what somebody does to you for their benefit, that's a schooling. Okay. That's the state. An education is what you do for yourself to create a good life. And then this begs the question of what is a good life? Well, this is up to you, mom and dad, for you to discuss amongst yourself and your child. I mean, these are questions that I really didn't get into till I got to work with Gatto and actually dive deeper into what it is to be human and what's happening here in this realm, in this body, in this consciousness. Like, this is very exciting to be a human. You know, I have a lot of gratitude when I wake up, I'm alive and I'm healthy. I could drink water and take a shower and go swimming. I mean, these experiences are what shape us as young people. And now when your child's in these schools, they are being dehumanized, they're being demoralized. And I can only imagine what it's like in the school where your child is right now. And I just want to mention one fact, because I know parents are very afraid. And so I used to think it'd take 1 to 2 years for you to evolve along the homeschool process, but I've changed what I believe in that, because I think you can do it about 60 to 90 days, but you have to be willing to change what you think about education. So I gave you that definition, the definition of homeschooling, but the apex of learning, and you're a champion at this, Josh, the apex is self-directed learning. This is where you don't learn for rewards or prizes. You learn because it's interesting. You're curious. And this is why some of us took the red pill, maybe the audience members, like, you know, what about 9/11? You know, or what about Operation Mockingbird? Or what about it? And you go and you research it and say, wow, okay, I'm getting this perspective. I'm getting this angle. This is learning how to think critically. And this is being removed from the school system by design. And so if you're afraid, take a deep breath and understand that homeschooling has been a de facto way of educating your child for thousands of years. It's only in the last 100 years with this compulsory system where now the state's involved. And right now in California, it's age 6 to age 18. They are trying to, that's the mandatory age of schooling. They want to bring it down to like age 5 or 4. And the system is so diabolical, the state would happily, as soon as you deliver the birth, out of your yoni, out of your vagina, moms, they'll take it and put them in the school system. I mean, this is how just such a criminal, insane organization it is, because they want a global totalitarian state. And that requires the young people believing in these ideas of authority. And, we need some super guy at the top of the pyramid to lead us, when in fact, the future that I see, I think what we're co-creating together through this conversation and future ones is a world where we all lead ourselves and we take personal responsibility for our lives. And this is not being taught in the school system. What's being taught is dependency and slave mentality. And I know that's hard to maybe stomach, but I'm to the point, just as Gatto was, I can't make light of the language. I have to call things as I see them.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess the last part I'll give it back to you here is that even if you leave your child in the school system, okay, I don't recommend that. I think that's a very bad move moving forward. But I understand, you got relationship problems, financial problems, fear problems, all these things, which, I can assist you with. But let's say for the next few months or whatever the timeline is, you have to leave your child in the school system. What Gatto taught us is that as long as you explain to the young person what's happening in the school system, say, hey, this is like a factory of control, of training, and let them look at the school as a actual laboratory of like, wow, why does the bell ring every 40 minutes? Why do I have to get permission to do this? So letting them know, hey, all of this is like a fabricated environment. This is not the real environment, and let them be able to observe that. And so they can have a conversation with them later And then it becomes a subject of conversation rather than, what did you learn at school today? It's like, what did you learn about school today? What did you feel in the classroom? And what did you notice? I mean, some of these high schools give their students a hall pass for the bathroom for the whole semester, like 8 hall passes. And I spoke to this guy, he's 15 years old. And I said, wow, you guys are getting 8 hall passes a year? And he says, yeah. He says, after you use all your 8 bathroom hall passes, you can't go to the bathroom in the classroom. I said, oh my, I can't even believe this is happening right now. So these are more motivation, more reasons, mom and dads, that you can take your child out. You're probably planning for the fall semester now as spring wraps up. So you can definitely do this, and we can talk about some of the other concerns or questions that you might have.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the most incredibly important parts of all of this is that, like, your brain absorbs things like a sponge in those years. When you are in, public school, you could be using your brain to learn about more important things that you're actually interested in. Okay, reading and writing and math are pretty important, but like those things you could learn at the very beginning, and you could just expand from there into so many different realms. They've been trying to make people weak, stupid, and compliant and obedient for a long time, and they are succeeding. It's that whole good times create, weak men create hard times create strong men create good times. It goes in a circle. You mentioned earlier about how to talk to CPS workers. And I think that what you said hits a nail on the head. It's so important because, I started my work following around CFS in Canada and going to a couple hundred court hearings. And, it's as little as they would come into your house because they were allowed in. They'd see there's some mud splashed on the wall by the doors where the boots go, in the wintertime when there's slush on the ground, et cetera. And they'd say, your house is inhospitable because it's dirty. We're taking your kids away. People would often threaten to kill these CFS agents, et cetera. And look, for all intents and purposes, everyone has a total right to be viciously angry and disgusted by these henchmen. However, we're not going to be able to reason with terrorists. What you need to do is try and do the thing that they're trying to get out of children's brains in school, is have a conversation and try and balance things and try to, have a peaceful resolution between individuals. Of course, you won't be able to win based on that, but you will be able to create a suitable environment when you're dealing with henchmen where you're not going to cause the situation to get worse. And then their partners, the police, are going to come in, and then, you're just going to have a pyramid of statism coming down on top of you. There's certain ways to have a conflict resolution without things spiraling out of control, though very difficult at times. With that said, all the things that you're saying are very important going forward. And I'd like to just hear your thoughts on how people can find out more information about getting out of this indoctrination, out of these indoctrination camps, how they could work with you. Because, one story I like to try and quickly tell people is when I was in about 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I was suspended a lot. In 5th grade, 76 times. But in the earlier grades, I'd get suspended and they'd put me into a white room. This white room, it was about the size of a small desk. Used to be used as storage. They put a window mirror in there. So when I looked into the window, I saw my face. When they looked into the window, they saw my face. They could spy on me. They could watch me. They wouldn't let me go to the bathroom for the whole day. Wouldn't let me have lunch. And this was just normal. No one really said anything. The PTA meetings, the mothers would freak out and say, well, we need this because it teaches the kids to be better in school. And no, it made me loathe school. It made me loathe statism. It made me hate authority because, and thank God for that in a lot of ways, in a roundabout sort of way. But if they're going to say, splashing a bit of mud on the wall, that's abuse, we need to take your kids away. Meanwhile, they'll put kids in a room, they'll try to force inject them with poison, and because they have a shiny magical badge or a shiny magical degree, and then they're going to put you in a window mirror room and spy on your child, that's abuse. And we need to start to understand, just because it's a government doesn't mean it's okay, which is unfortunately something so many people seem to have this thing stuck in the back of their head that is the case. Anyway, I'm rambling on. I'd like to hear you give people some information on how they can get involved in what you're doing and how they can start that process of pulling their kids out of school.
Right. So I do have a Facebook group called Homeschool Leader. And if you want some one-on-one consulting, you can email me at info@homeschoolleader.com. It's a process. I also have a YouTube channel called Education Options TV. And so this is a kind of a compilation of some of the speakers that I've had at my conference called Education Options Expo, because I started to get passionate about this about 5 years ago when I saw the forced vaccine agenda. And I said, man, we got to get these kids out of the school system. And I wasn't super gung-ho on homeschooling yet. I thought I wanted to build my own physical school. And then I found out there's some cost prohibitive. There's some barriers to entry with a physical building. And then more empowering is this idea that the world is already a classroom and there's lessons to be learned. So those are some places that you can find me. One of the other things I want to address here just quickly about the CPS is something about curriculum, because these seem to be the steps to overcome, or the hurdles to overcome CPS. If CPS ever contacts you, be kind and ask for them to send something to you in writing. So if they come to the door, they call you up, whatever the claim is, because when they're speaking to you, they'll behave differently. But when you say, you know what, I'd love to speak with you, but my legal counsel has suggested that I get it in writing, then that will kind of make them take a step back. They go after easy targets. And unfortunately, they go after the lower class, the single parents. It's very rare they go after middle class, two-parent homes. So get it in writing. Yeah. The other part is about curriculum. Mom and dad say, well, I think schools are terrible, and I'm not afraid of CPS. Okay, socialization, I got that. We'll take them around shopping. We'll form our own little pod. We'll have our own play dates. And that's what you got to do, mom and dad. It's not super overwhelming unless you try to take on everything. So basically, have your child have a few friends, go on a play date, and just do maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, or, eventually you can get up weekly. But the first launching aspect of it is the most difficult part for you. The child's ready to play, just the world's a classroom for them, but it's you, mom and dad. So you will have to think about that, like having a play date, 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, and then there's associations and things like that.
Yeah.
Now the word curriculum comes from the word course or path. So like a road, your child is on their own path. Josh is on a path. I'm on a path. We're all on our own path. So nobody knows where my future path is going to go. They might see some tendencies, but your child in the same way has some interests, some curiosities. So if they're interested in skateboarding, then maybe have some skateboarding magazines delivered, or go to some skateboarding event, or, use your your adult futuristic visionary mindset to say, okay, maybe they'll be interested, and you just kind of spread some crumbs of interest there. And they're always, free to change it. But that's what curriculum means. So rather than say, okay, I'm going to download a curriculum, you're going to memorize this, we're going to take a test, there, now you're educated. No, educated is not like that. Getting an education is like trying to get fit at the gym. You can get your child a gym membership, but unless they want to actually have big muscles, then you can't do push-ups for your child. So this is why it's so important that you as a mother or father, you create that environment of respect, of safety, where mistakes are not just welcomed, mistakes are encouraged. Because in school, if you got low grades, they call you a failure. But in the real world, in business, in science, in art, you want to fail as much as you can. And then as you become an advanced, evolved human, you understand you are not your mistakes. Your mistakes are different from you. So the more mistakes you make, the better, the more confident you feel, because you're no longer attached to, oh, this is what I got on my SAT test, or whatever course that the society tries to put you on. And by the way, this whole thing has been fabricated for over 100 years. And thanks to the work of Gatto and Charlotte Iserbyt and other people out there, Alex Newman, a lot of people are starting to expose this. And so curriculum is your own path. And if you see the world as an open source, open basic laboratory university, then the most important thing you can do, mom and dad, is to allow your child's natural desire to learn and that love of learning to just grow. How did your child learn to speak? They were practicing babble. How do they learn to walk? They're stumbling around. And so these are the most important skills they can learn, but there was no curriculum. There was no compulsion. It was, you can do it. Yay. Oh, you almost there. It was this encouragement. So if anything, mom and dad, you're an encourager. You're a learning partner. You're a coach. And if you see yourself as this rather than a teacher, and of course you're a teacher indirectly because your child's modeling you, they're watching you, they're mimicking you, but you're not a teacher in that it's like, okay, class, it's time for math. Okay, time for English. That is called school at home. And I recommend you move out of that phase as soon as possible. The next phase is called deschooling. Deschooling is where you let your child decompress from the stress and the pressure in the state school system. The rule of thumb is that for every year they were in a compulsory learning environment, you got to give them a month of total free time. So let's say a sixth grader, maybe 12 years old, they were in the system for 6 years. You got to give them 6 months approximately to decompress. Just like if you have a bottle of soda, you shake it up. You don't just open it up and drink it. You open it up and let all the pressure release. Your child is under a lot of pressure. You want to let that release. And then if they want to play video games all day and all night, you got to let them play video. If they want to sleep all day, all night, you got to let them play that. And then after that period of deschooling, they actually will come back into their body. They will become connected to who they are and what they're doing on this planet and this joy of life. And then they will actually be wanting to learn. They will want to go to the library with you. They'll want to go to outings or events because they want to go meet people. They want to learn. They're more motivated to learn than we are because their brains and the neurons in their head, they're eager to make connections. And I think that's what's really exciting about that. And so the phases are school at home, deschooling, homeschooling, and the fourth one is 100% self-directed learning. And they can get there in 6 months, maybe 12 months, maybe less, but it's up to you, mom and dad, to kind of create that space rather than forcing stuff on them. Allow them to grow and effectively like water them like you would a plant. And then it just makes it a lot easier for you. But there is kind of a learning curve in the beginning. So you can reach me on the Facebook group. You can email me and some of the YouTube channels there that you can, watch some of that stuff for free.
Absolutely. You mentioned Alex Newman there for a moment, and he's a good guy, and he has this incredibly educated son, and he's got a few kids, but one of his sons I met, and he was a little kid, must have been 9 or something like that. And he came up to me at an event one time, and this is a kid that's homeschooled, and he comes up to me and says, ask me any question about the monetary system. If I get it wrong, or if I get it right, you have to pay me $5. Well, 2 questions in of really difficult monetary history questions that I'm throwing at this little kid. He got both in a row right, and they were really difficult. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm done playing, but good for you, kid. That's a great example of like the education among so many of these kids that are homeschooled. Also, the personality, the difference in personality is so obvious.
Yeah.
It's same between children that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. You just see this massive difference. And on that comment, I do want to quickly, before we end this, you have been one of the biggest heroes in standing up against these restrictions, this inhuman tyranny we've been witnessing for over 2 years now. And you have been just constantly abused for standing up and just being the voice of reason and being the voice of sanity. You've been arrested more than almost anyone I've seen in activism in the last 2 years. You've just been attacked from all ends. So I wanted to ask you, like, how is everything going legally? Are you doing all right? Is there anything people can do to help you with your legal battles and your work to try and, bring humanity back to humans?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking that. Yeah, we set up a website, freedavid.org. I am facing some charges, and it's been going on for maybe over 1.5 years now. They did arrest me, and it's crazy abuse. The reality is that I've been a right to travel activist for about 3 years, which means I had private plates on my car because I learned that I'm not a commercial driver, which that is means I transport persons or property for profit, for business, like a UPS, taxi driver, Uber. I'm not that. That's what the driver license is for. And so I started putting that to test the last few years. Because there's mythologies out there, and I want to know from my own personal experience what the heck is going on. So I've been doing that. And then when the whole lockdowns came, this is early 2020, we got together with some of our voluntarist friends and say, hey man, like this is pretty serious, and we see big trouble on the horizon. And so we got together and they tried to close down the beaches. And so they literally closed it from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so we got like 12 of our friends and we went with the bullhorn and we said, we now declare the beach open. And then we walked onto the beach and it was freaking awesome. We had a victory. And then we did it the next week. And then we did it the next week. And pretty soon we had, 40, 50 people out there. And this is on video. The health officer said on video, we were hoping to keep the beaches closed, but the people refused to be governed. And so we have to reopen the beaches. And so we were just one of the groups. I know there was other groups, maybe like some surfer people, but so we're like, okay, that was good. So then when they did the mask at the grocery stores where you have to wear a mask, and we looked into all the exemptions and the public accommodations and the UNRWA Civil Rights Act, they're totally discriminating against medical conditions or religious reasons. And so we did some maskless shopping. Well, when you're in an area which is super statist or super lefty,
California,
and you're live stream, we were live streaming it, and a lot of these videos went viral, and we were getting 50,000, 100,000 views sometimes of our maskless shopping, experiences. We pissed off these statists, and so I think they called up the sheriff or the DA, and pretty soon they started targeting me because I'm kind of the outspoken guy, and somewhat leading the way in some cases. And so so that's what's happening. I am facing some charges. Court is scheduled for June. I'm open to receive donations for legal fees. I am acting as my own attorney because the other public defenders and even other bar attorneys, they have a license and they're loyal to the bar association more than the clients. Yeah, this is a huge racketeering thing. You kind of mentioned the straw man earlier, and it's another rabbit hole which is worth going down. And it seems to be valid about the birth certificate, the social security number. It seems to be a trust, which they have monetized. They put on the stock market, and they are literally using your body and my body, our children's body, as collateral for the debt of this country. And I'm like, I couldn't believe what's going on. So these are some of the like alarms that I saw, and I said, we got to do something. And I still feel like that now. However, I do feel like it's an intergenerational agenda. So then a solution is intergenerational freedom. So we got to stay healthy, alive, strong. One of our heroes, and maybe one of your mentors potentially is, Mr. G. Edward Griffin. He's got to be in his 90s. I think Ron Paul is close to his 90s. And this is power of one dude, two dudes, And so this is important to see that one guy can make a huge difference. One woman can make a massive impact. And that can be your child. That's my hope for you. Your son or daughter is that one for your family, to make sure that your legacy and your name and your goals and dreams, whatever that's your values, your traditions, get passed on. Because, unfortunately with the injuries or the indoctrination, it really breaks up families. One of my friends, his daughter's a teen, and she's like coming home saying, oh, I'm a boy, and I'm like, okay, well, that's fine for a temporary while, but then now they're talking about these hormones, these puberty blockers, even like sex changes. And I'm like, wow, so this is going to destroy families, and we don't want that to happen. So we're trying to be ahead of the curve and having these conversations, saying the school system is probably the worst place to put your child. And I was just reading something from Gatto this week, and he said, through my experience, I realized that schools are not safe places to leave your child. And that's him teaching for 30 years. He was the New York State Teacher of the Year. He's got a lot of videos on YouTube as well. So the big, I think, takeaway, mom and dad, is that you can do this. This is not overly difficult. what's difficult is overcoming our own limitations in our own mind of, well, what am I going to do? I'm not qualified. I don't know how to do the curriculum, this socialization. And you're not going to get it after one conversation, perhaps, but we can do coaching. You can join the group, but you have to learn because your child is depending on you. And our previous experiences and the old world is not going to be the new world. And they want to have the great reset. But I think what's happening is humanity is bifurcating, meaning the slaves are going one way and freedom's going another way. And I think that's going to happen. There's going to be tribes of freedom people. There's going to be tribe of status, and God bless everybody. But I want your children and my children and everybody who's watching this to be that light that they are, to be that powerful young woman or young man, so that they can actually live a life that's exciting and fulfill what they're supposed to do here, which I think is about love. I think it's about freedom, truth, contribution, courage, and a lot of other things. But those are some of the ways that they can, stay in contact. And I just wanted to mention that you got this, mom and dad. This is not as difficult as you might think. There is a small hill, but it's not a mountain. You're not climbing Mount Everest, okay? It's a small little molehill, and you'll get over it in a month or 2 or 6 months, and then you'll say how easy it is. Because the difference between a schooling is that the teacher does 95% of the work and the student does 5%, whereas homeschooling, the student himself does 95% of the work. And you, as I mentioned before, you're facilitating peace, respect, harmony in this environment. And then once you get that, it makes it very simple. And then you can enjoy watching your child become a powerful young man or young woman.
Absolutely. Well, I really, really appreciate everything that you do, David. And I urge people to go to freedavid.org. I'll have all the links below. Valor-academy.com. That's valor-academy.com as well. And all the links are below this video. So get involved if you can, my friends. This is a very important crossroads in history. And as you kind of mentioned, we're going into 2 worlds. We're splitting in 2. Let's go on the path of freedom, not towards, the further statism, technocracy, and inhuman transhumanist agenda. So anyway, I really appreciate everything you're doing, and hope we'll talk again sometime soon.
I'm sure we will. Thank you, Josh. Good luck, everybody.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.